Good morning, everyone. Good morning. If it's Saturday morning, then you have put yourself in front of the television like Biff Buffington in chat, and you are in the Cafe BTW morning gaming podcast zone. It's like the Saturday morning cartoon that you forgot about, and I'm here every Saturday morning to help you with that, whether you're sleeping or not, because we know, you know what, we're on VOD, and I want to say hello to everyone that's watching as well on VOD. And everyone here that's live, I really appreciate it. I saw Jan and Biff and Acid and Genzo is back. Really, really good to be back. I'm exhausted. I was in San Francisco Thursday, stayed the night, went to the GDC conference, which we're going to talk about. And it's been a whirlwind. I didn't think I'd be doing the podcast this morning, but because I got home late last night, I thought, you know what? I got to sneak in an episode. I don't have a guest today, so it's just going to be you and I, which I do enjoy these walkthroughs. I have a really interesting episode planned. Not only are we going to talk about GDC, which is the Game Developers Conference that was my first conference since 2019's TwitchCon, PAX, and other things like that. So really my first, not my, I've been going to retro swaps, but this is really a video game convention, which is GDC, and we're going to talk about that. So I'm a little tired, so forgive me, but we weren't going to miss this morning. If I was home, I was going to be doing it. This is commitment, people. But I'm not afraid to take time off when I have to. I'm a busy man. But if you could see in the topic thread, we have GDC, and my topic today is the lost art of the video game manual, which I really thought was an interesting topic. I was on the plane yesterday, and I'm like, what are we going to talk about tomorrow besides GDC? Because the whole episode won't be able to, it won't make sense to cover GDC. There wasn't that much to cover for a full hour of a podcast. So I thought I've been wanting to talk about the lost art of the video game manual, which is obviously, besides wanting to own complete in-box sets, if you want a complete in-box set of a retro game, you need to have the manual. So we're going to talk about that day. We're going to look at some manuals. We're going to dive deep into that world of video game manuals. But a little dirty laundry to clear up before we get started with the show. I just wanted to mention that we have kicked off the retro gaming community on Twitter. So Twitter is allowing you to create these centralized communities. And as you can see, we have in just a matter of under a month, we have accumulated over 785 members. So if you're a Twitter person that likes using Twitter, definitely join our Twitter community. I'm sharing the link in chat. I know, Genzo, we should probably run that on a timer eventually, because I think it would be cool to give people an option. And it's really cool. It's a safe place for you to share your retro gaming aside from posting on the main timeline. If you don't want to share pickups and stuff on your main timeline, you could join the retro gaming community on Twitter that we're running. And guess what? Once they open up spaces, which is a way for us to do these talks and panels, we're going to be doing weekly talks, video game chats and stuff like that. We're already doing a giveaway donated by DK Oldies. If you find this tweet inside the community, we hit 700 members. So donated by DK Oldies, which is a online distributor of retro games to purchase. They've given us an NES Tetris, and I'm throwing in the Spider-Man 2 and the Nintendo pack from back in the day. So if you jump in, this is going to be going on, this giveaway, till Thursday the 31st at 9 a.m. All you have to do is comment why you love video games, and we're going to randomize and pick a winner. Again, DK Oldies represented and supported us by giving us a Tetris NES. So this is a physical giveaway, folks. This isn't just a digital card giveaway. So if you want to be a part of the retro gaming Twitter community that I'm leading the way and just bring together, all the things I love talking about, but bring together the people, join the Twitter community. Really would appreciate it and help us grow that. Wayward, I've just joined recently. I love it. Wayward Wolf, welcome to the Cafe BTW podcast. I'm taking care of myself. Thank you very much. Biss says some of the best manuals in video games has been THPS and works as I miss having manuals. No, there is just nothing as a collector that hurt. Well, So excited that I've already hearing and welcome to the. I love seeing new people in chat as well. So welcome, Wolf Knight. Really appreciate you joining the Cafe BTW podcast. A little bit of notes. Last week I was featured on 2 podcasts as a guest. Gaming Memories podcast had me on. It was a really cool episode. You got to check out this guy's podcast. It's very, very cool. He's coming on. His name is Cade. He's coming on the show. I'll make sure to link this stuff out. And also it's available in our Discord. And if you want to hit up the Discord, you could check that out because that kind of pings you for the podcast and so forth. And also was also a filling in guest host for Retro Game Brews. Shout out to Retro Game Brews on the awesome Gamers Week podcast on episode 13 last week. So if you're interested, that is also available where I'm featured as a guest on a different podcast. Thought it was really cool. I had a great time on both. And, it's really fun to kind of mix it up. And besides doing the Cafe BTW podcast, to join other awesome retro gaming podcasts. So you can find more of my voice across some other podcasts. So please be sure to check it out. Yeah, it was really fun. All right, Genzo, see you later, man. Thanks for stopping by in the beginning. So I was up in San Francisco. I live in Los Angeles, if you didn't know that. And I was up in San Francisco. Acid says, I can see why it's considered wasteful or whatever reason they stopped making them. But video game manuals were a huge draw for me and a part of my immersion of getting started in a new game. All right, we're going to talk about that, Acid. But first, let's talk a little bit about the event I went to. And I'm not sure a lot of people know what the Game Developers Conference is. The Game Developers Conference, this was the first time in 2 years they held it again, and it's a yearly convention, which is a little bit more focused on developers and like the tech side of the gaming industry, where they can show off some new technology that comes to whether it's, which I noticed a lot of Web3 stuff, blockchain stuff, but a lot of like stuff like there was a huge display for Unity was there, Unreal Engine, Adobe, like all these huge technical sides, a very technical side of the gaming industry were there to talk through with developers. And there's a lot of technology, including, I think there was a demo of the new PS5 VR, which I wasn't able to try, but just a good example of like showcasing more of the tech side of the industry, kind of like the CES of the gaming industry. And it was held in San Francisco, and I flew up on Thursday at an expo pass, and I was running around the floor. And let me tell you, like, just being there at a convention was just something huge to talk about, because I used to go to a lot of shows and events. As a person that works in the gaming industry, I would go to TwitchCon, to the PAXs, like PAX East, PAX West, even PAX South. I would go to DreamHack, which is a huge event in like the esports era. And then there's GDC and CES. This is the first time they've been back in person. And I got to say, we've been so behind cameras and sitting on Zoom calls, and going on a floor and being able to be face to face with people. And as you could tell, I love networking. I love talking to people. People make me excited, and like talking and communicating and connecting. It's one of my favorite things to do. So being able to go back to a convention and be able to feel that connection. I want to say that, we're all thinking like this digital world, like we'll never have to be doing things, go to work again or do things in person, but there's nothing like connecting with someone in person. And that's something that kind of resurfaced for me during this convention the last few days. Let's see. Waywolf says, same, I know why they stopped it, but I feel a piece is missing. Yes, we're going to talk about that. But the conference was good. And, San Francisco, can I say this about San Francisco? It is an expensive city. Holy moly. Like, I had to find an Airbnb, and I found an Airbnb, but it turned out to be not such a great Airbnb. But man, hotel prices were like $400 to $500 a night. The gas prices are close to $8 up in San Francisco. It's not the greatest place to have a convention these days because it's pretty pricey, but it was a beautiful floor. They obviously checked, you had to have a vaccine to get in. You had to wear a mask on the floor. So it was very much following a lot of the guidelines and all that stuff that you see at a GDC or a convention and stuff like that. I think one of the coolest things I noticed, so this is really interesting. There was a place on the floor called Alt.Control. And what Alt.Control was students and young video game developers that were showcasing interactive games. And I have a video here that I actually took, and you could see that this is a montage of games that have some type of interactivity, some kind of physical form of interactivity. And I was talking to all these awesome people, because what's so cool is talking to these young students and these young developer minds and how they're figuring out, how can we do more immersive physical interaction with a video game? Like this game, the controllers were literally a mustard and a mustard bottle, if you see in the guy's hands, a mustard bottle and a ketchup bottle. And it was kind of like a food-oriented game. And it's just like really cool to see, kind of like to experience in person, not just watching on a trailer or watching on a Twitch stream, but to experience in person creativity and design, and really just showcasing that. And that's kind of what GDC did. Now, one of the coolest things that's relative to what we love, which is retro gaming, was I ran into this booth, which was run by the Museum of Art and Digital Entertainment, and they had playable systems set up, like the original Atari 2600 here. This is Diablo 2 running on an old HP laptop, which honestly, Diablo 2, the original, is my favorite game of all time. But there was like, it's kind of getting almost strange that these are beginning to be considered museum pieces, you know? So you can see here, you got a PlayStation 1 with Twisted Metal. You got a Super NES with Doom playing there. You have this this girl playing in NES on a... And by the way, these like small-sized televisions are awesome. But I appreciated this because we're at a convention that's about progression and progress and showcasing new technology, but there was this whole featured area showcasing the love and appreciation of what brought us here. Like all these games and these old computers and iMac there, you got the original Civilization. You know what was the best part about this? It wasn't just like they were on display. You could actually sit, and like this gentleman was doing, was playing the original Civilization. And what I found out was they were a museum in San Francisco that is no longer up right now because of COVID, but what they're doing is they're starting to go to events and setting up. But when the museum was around, apparently you would go in and you'd be able to play any old games you wanted. So they had Genesis set up, 3DOs, whatever it might be. And the whole idea of this kind of museum was interactivity, giving you the opportunity to play these games on their original systems, which is fantastic. Like, incredible. And I just want to say, when you're thinking about preservation of games, when I go to a convention and I see old games set up, it's so important to appreciate what these systems meant to us. And, you know, we wouldn't be here today if we didn't have these home consoles from the 80s or the late 70s, you know, that came out, whether it's ColecoVision, Odyssey, Atari 2600, to the NES, to the Super Nintendo, to the early 90s computer boom or the Commodore boom, the Amiga games. All these matter to the history of where we are today. You look at games today on the PS5, they wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the appreciation and the love of what brought us here. So I think it's so important that companies or organizations, and this is a nonprofit, by the way, are really appreciating and making sure that people never forget what brought us here. And actually seeing Adventure hooked up, I played this, and it was freaking cool. Oh, see you, Way Wolf Knife. Appreciate it. Thanks for stopping by. Have a great Saturday. It was really great. What's up, Ducks? Good to see you. Good morning, sir. We're just talking about GDC. But overall, GDC was cool. I mean, I don't have a lot to take away from it besides that I did a lot of networking. I learned a lot. What I noticed was there was a lot of like data management, like new ways of working through project management when you're developing video games, a lot of engines, a lot of upgrades to engines. Like Unity had on display like their most updated engine that you can use, and they were showcasing all the newest games that are using the Unity engine. So it was very tech savvy. A lot of things were going over my head because I'm not a developer and I don't speak the developer language, but I thought that people were doing a really good job in explaining their products to me as someone that's more of a marketer. Like, I work in digital marketing. I'm not a developer, but I'm also very interested in the development process in this modern age. Another thing I noticed was tons of Web3 focused things. But one of the coolest parts of GDC was they had booths by country. So they have the Canada booth, and the Canada booth would have all their studios that they brought that represent Canada. And they had Swiss Games was there. So all these studios from Switzerland were there. The French booth was really cool because I went up to the French booth. And I'm like, what are you guys doing here? He's like, we are the French. This is our booth and these are our games. And he was he was so good. He was like, come to France and see how many games we make. That's my horrible French accent. But there was also Brazil. I saw Chile. And it was really cool to experience. I think that was my favorite part, to experience the international stages and meeting all these developers from other countries. And there was one booth that was set up representing studios from Wales in the UK. So it was really cool. I think that was my favorite part because there's nothing more interesting than meeting different parts of the world and how they're developing games and what games they're developing, because games are becoming more universal every day. Jan says, Web3 focus, NFE, all things. Yes. So Jan, they did have a ton of blockchain focus, but didn't overtake the con. There was still a lot of seeded development focus and, just working in engines. How do they, a lot of project management software for developers, which was interesting. But I loved it and I had a great time. I'm exhausted though, because I flew in from San Francisco. I literally landed back in LA last night at like midnight. So I'm definitely feeling the burn, but I didn't want to miss the podcast today. But if you want to check out, the really cool, which was the Museum of Art and Digital Entertainment. This is their Twitter account, The Made. So give them a follow, check them out. They are doing the most important part of video game of being a part of the video game industry, which is preservation and appreciation and the cataloging the history of video games, which to me is very, very important. Jan says, makes sense, though, that there was a focus on data management. Sharing information outside the game environment can make for a nice, immersive experience. You know what was one of the most interesting ones? You guys are going to love this. They blew me away. There was this company, and forgive me, I forgot. I think they were called Modulate. And you know what their software did? It was an audio toxicity software that can be plugged into a game and immediately pick up audio cues from people being toxic and then relay that information in audio form to let them know that there's a lot of things going on right now in their game. So say you're playing a Call of Duty and there's a lot of racism chat happening. This type of technology could pick up any voice recognition on any bad filtered words and relay it back immediately to the moderators so they can take action. I thought that was really fascinating because there's nothing worse than voice toxicity. I mean, we can control toxicity in Discords, we can control toxicity in Twitch chats, but when you take it another layer to being able to figure out how to relay it through audio cues and knowing when people are saying really nasty things, that technology was super interesting. And there were a couple, I would say 2 to 3 different versions of that type of software. And I was really interested in that. Look out, Comedy Night. Jan says, kind of like how well-made games have very well-integrated tutorials like Tunic. By the way, they had Tunic set up because Tunic was made on Unity as well. Jan says, essentially associating bad words with additional parameters in order to better filter its use. Yeah, it was pretty fascinating that technology that there's actually companies that are doing their part to figure out how do we combat toxicity. And if you're getting in front of it with figuring out how to control audio cues, that's really interesting to me. So I was blown away when the guy was describing it, and I said, is this a working product? He says, absolutely. We're already in a few games. So the developer has to accept their software into their game system, and what it does is it gives the moderators, whoever's moderating the video game itself, will be queued up to learning what's happening from an audio standpoint of toxicity in a game. And I think that's fascinating. So look into that. It's something that we're going to see more of. And I think that, the more we can combat toxicity, as you know, I love people. I love community. I think gaming still has lots of issues. We're getting through a lot of them, whether it's, from all the way to the developer publishers, the way they treat their employees, all the way to in-game toxicity, to Twitter toxicity, to TikTok toxicity, to anything that's involved in gaming and how people interact with each other. Let's fight that. And I think that it's so cool that we're finding more products and projects that fight and combat toxicity because we can fight it. That being said, I had a good time. GDC wasn't really my, cup of tea because it was more developer focused. It wasn't creator focused like a PAX would be or a TwitchCon. But the number one part I'm take away from it was the fact that I got to be at an event back alive, feeling like I'm a person again. And I'm not just on a Zoom chat. You know what I mean? Biff says, in a case like Comedy Night, the devs didn't care. Well, that was the case with them, is that they didn't care. And that was, hey, D, what's up? Good to see you. I'm glad you're stopping by on your break. I hope you're having a good day. It sounds like you're working on a Saturday, but welcome to the Cafe BTW podcast. Dee's going to be our guest on an upcoming show. Check her out. She's on TikTok, Twitter, and all the things. Awesome creator as well and collector in the retro space. All right. Let's get into the topic today. Let's talk quickly. This isn't going to be a super long episode because I don't have a guest, but today's topic, like we mentioned at the top of the show, is the lost art of the video game manual. I understand, and I see that there was a lot of people in chat already talking about that. We understand why manuals are disappearing, and that has to do with, printing paper and distributing paper, but there's kind of like a resurgence for that, ever since the pandemic, and there was an explosion for collecting, whether it was Pokemon, retro gaming, it really goes to the fact that people want to actually create tangible things again. Like there's a lot of interesting things I'm hearing about with re-releasing video game magazines. And I understand printing paper is becoming a lost art. But there's something about the nostalgia of a video game manual that means so much to us all. And especially when you're collecting complete in box sets, you have to get the manual, and the manuals are becoming very costly and expensive themselves. You can go on to eBay right now and you could buy manuals, but look at these prices. Like Zoda's Revenge, which is Star Troopers 2, to buy a manual for that, you have to literally pay $23. It's literally an interesting environment we're in because people are collecting manuals. And back in the day, you might have thrown out your manual. You might have said, ripped open your box and thrown out your manual. Now, me personally, I ripped my box and then I would sit in the back of my parents' car and I would read the manual on my way back from the video game store. That was immediately my first instinct when I bought a new video game. D says, manuals were such a part of my childhood. That same game I mentioned earlier has a manual built in and they're collectible. It's a great example. I like Limited Run does manuals for a lot of their games, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, and by the way, I ran it. Limited Run was at GDC, and I do appreciate what Limited Run is doing and I Am 8-Bit because they are re-releasing games that might not be affordable anymore. And I do appreciate that. And I think they are releasing manuals, right, D? I think that's definitely what they're doing. But look at all the just manuals people are selling. Snoopy, manual for King Ring and Ninja Gaiden is $14. A Fist of the North Star is $29. You want your own Zelda Twilight Princess manual? Well, that's going to cost you $30. So it's becoming definitely a collectible and a nostalgia piece. And I want to hear what in chat. Like, what are your memories of a manual? Did you immediately rip open the game and read through the manual? Did you play the game first and then kind of like hold the manual in your lap? I remember I would be playing. And there's just like this love, and I'm getting butterflies thinking about putting the manual on my lap while I play the NES and looking up and down, just making sure that I'm getting the controls right. And then once you got all the controls right in the game, you know, you didn't need the manual as much, but some of the manuals also had character design and really explained more of the lore and the story. There was just something fascinating about it. And it's really interesting that we've never talked about it on the podcast yet. So I thought that this would be a good episode. Now, what's really cool about the internet is that someone out there has a site, and I'm going to put it in chat. It's called it's called gamesdatabase.org, which you might have heard of. But they have over 14,809 manuals digitally scanned into the site. And we're going to walk through and talk a little bit more about manuals and look at them and kind of bring back some memories. And I pulled up a bunch of random manuals that we're going to be able to look through right now. Ducks in the Side says, I'd read the manual on the way home, and then I'd sit right next to me while I played. Good times. Totally. So you felt, Ducks, that sort of nostalgia that I was feeling too, by opening up the box and sitting in the back. But let's check out the first manual I have pulled up is the wonderful, probably one of the greatest games of all time, if not considered one of the greatest Super Mario Brothers of all time, is Super Mario Bros. 3. And as you can see here, which is super cool, is we have the whole manual scanned digitally. And this is a part of preservation, folks. This is saying to the world, like, hey, you don't have the manual, but we have the manual for you, and it's all here. And look at this beautiful art. The NES really put a lot of detail into their manuals, from the color pages, like even the fine detail, the top of the page where you have the color tops with the just good text and all this coloration. It's just so great. And then always wanted to look at the controller side of the manual. And as you can see, Super Mario Bros. 3 does a really good job at showing you techniques. And look at the wonderful drawings. Like, I would die to have the original illustrations from this stuff. Oh man, I love this. Didn't know this was. Yes, everyone, please check out this website. If you want to see manuals like this, whether it's manuals or cover art, the gamesdatabase.org, which I put in chat, is awesome. And Eisen says, I was usually too excited to play to bother with the manual, only use them if I got stuck, which is totally fine. And hey, welcome to the chat, sir. Our first-time chatter is Eisen. Welcome, sir. We really appreciate you, and welcome to the Cafe BTW podcast. But yes, let's go through a little bit more of the design of the Super Mario Brothers NES manual. Just beautiful. Look at this. God darn beautiful, everyone. It's just unbelievably an amazing manual. One that I have, my Super Mario Bros. 3, I don't have the manual, believe it or not. I only have a loose cart of Super Mario Bros. 3. Biff says the Sega CD manuals were huge and colorful. Absolutely. Let's move on to the next game I pulled, which is an N64 manual. Of course, GoldenEye 007, which is a manual and game, a game that we definitely loved. But look at the attention to detail on this one as well. It kind of gives you that feeling that you're looking at a notebook, because if you look on the side, they have this detail as if you have markers on a notebook. And I thought that's like kind of like a little thing you might not have noticed before, but it's really cool, where it kind of showcases like, oh, I'm flipping through this like I have tabs, in a binder. So that's really cool. Tony Hawk Pro Skater and Skate both had manuals that taught you manuals. Oh, I think you mean like taught you all the tricks and stuff. Duck says, yeah, Super Mario Bros. 3 is amazing. But yeah, let's take a look at the good old Bond manual, which is an N64 manual, which has wonderful pictures from the actual movie, where Pierce Brosnan looking so cool as Bond here. It's got a really cool aesthetic, very Bond-like. Let's move on to the next one, which is 10-Yard Fight for the NES. So we're looking at another manual. Now you can see that not all NES manuals put as much detail as, say, a Super Mario Bros. 3, but this is 10-Yard Fight, which is pretty much not the greatest football game ever made, but it was a game I played a lot of. But you can see here they went with a black and white design. Doesn't pull out like very much excitement here, but they still show you as best as they can illustrations and how to play the game itself and how to kick or whatnot. It's definitely not the greatest of manuals, but thought it was worth showing because it's good to show the good ones, the bad ones, but regardless, it's still interesting. Here's Knight Rider for the NES, which I don't know if it's a game you've played before, but again, this one, not as much detail, but very well formed and tells you exactly what you need to know, especially like breaking down what is everything on the screen. So they give you like a little key here, and you could see that there's a timer and there's a voice gauge, there's a shield indicator, there's a gas gauge, a hood. Really breaking these things down. Taking a game that you just purchased, and if you read the manual, it's going to show you that much more. All right, moving on to the next one. We're going into Game Boy, which don't forget, Game Boy also had manuals. This is the Batman game for the Game Boy, and I always love the illustration of the Game Boy with the showing you the controls and what you're doing. This one visually doesn't show you a ton, but obviously very much shows you all the ins and outs of what everything is on the screen. Obviously, Game Boy games aren't as involved, at least some of them aren't. So this, I'm not surprised that this manual isn't that in-depth. Let's go to the Super Nintendo. I pulled up Super R-Type, which is a shoot 'em up, and I'm terrible at it. But you could tell here they put a lot of attention into the color and the detail of this manual. Really beautiful with the purple and kind of gradient design here, matching up with some really beautiful photos, and then also gives you a little bit background on the lore as well, which I think is always really important. And you got a lot of that from the manuals growing up. That's how you kind of like learned about some of the story beyond what they shared in the game. In the manual, they would sometimes give you some good story. Obviously, a really beautiful display here of the controller, all the controls, so you know what you're doing. Really, really good detail here as well. Also showing you different types of lasers you can use, the missiles you can use. They throw in some cool design on one of the bad guys here. A beautiful look at Saturn. Just a really pretty manual. So going on from the NES to the Super NES to the Game Boy, you see kind of a mix of really detailed to not so much detail, but regardless, a lot of information to take in, especially on an R-Type manual as well, and also beautiful design. Now, let's move up to a little bit. We're going to skip around, by the way, but we got Metroid Prime, which is considered probably one of the best Metroid games of all time, especially the fact that it became a first-person shooter. One of my favorite GameCube games, without a doubt. Here's what the manual looks like. It has all those kind of like interesting Metroid-like aesthetics. Look at this wonderful story, which kind of breaks down a lot of the Metroid Prime lore. Who are these bad guys, the space pirates? The adventure begins, so they tell you getting started. Here's the title screen. Here's the main menu. Here's all the details on sound, on the controller. There's a progressive scan mode, if you didn't know. Beautiful layout of the controller with that beautiful Metroid aesthetic background there. Love the look at this, actually. Really cool. Also, if you don't have Metroid Prime, it's becoming a very pricey game, but if you've never played this, please check it out. It's really one of my favorite Metroid games, and they obviously did a great job with the manual, which I think I do have the manual as well. And what's cool about manuals is they don't have so much ads in them. So that's another plus. Like you don't have like a game magazine where you have a ton of ads. You know, manuals don't really have ads in them. They might showcase like another game. Like here, they show you that you can connect your game Metroid Fusion in some form or fashion to the actual. I didn't know that you could link up that too. But, you know, thank God I have the manual here. So next one I have here is actually Virtual Boy. I thought it'd be interesting. Hey, the Virtual Boy might not have been the greatest system, but they had manuals too. And this is Mario Tennis, which is honestly a great game if you could handle the red. But not too much. I don't think there's a lot of detail here. It looks like, we got some detail. Look at that. The layout design from the Virtual Boy controller, which is really interesting. Just getting some coffee in here, folks. Does everyone have coffee? Because I love coffee. How could you not love coffee? But you could see here that they put some design, a lot more text than color, because obviously the Virtual Boy is really hard to look at. But no, they got a lot. Actually, they have more design than I thought. They're like, here's the court, the opponent, your player. Coffee is life. It is. That definitely is. Let's move on to, I believe this is actually California Games, the Sega Master System manual. So I wanted to showcase the Sega Master System a little bit. Let's read what they wrote here. Hit the beaches and compete for the most radical sports trophy on the coast. California Games takes you there for a gnarly tournament of 6 games. Up to 8 friends can compete. Pick from cool teams like Spin Jammer and Casio. Practice or compete in one or a few or all events. So grab your sunglasses and sandals. Surf's up, dude. Time to jam. That's just cool. Like, they're like, here you go. Read this little paragraph explaining exactly what you're going to be doing in this game for quite some time. So that's really cool. I really like reading that. I've never played California Games on the Master System, but I thought it was a very bland manual. Not surprised that it's an older system. That's interesting. There's like a Jewish star next to the half pipe. Obviously, because the Master System controller doesn't have much features to it, that's pretty much it. They're like, here's your buttons. Here you go. This is what you do. But yeah, not very impressed by the Master System manual, but nonetheless, plenty of information here for someone to learn what they're doing or figure out what they're doing when it comes to that. Moving on to Genesis, one of my favorite games, a game that I don't have the manual, is Castlevania Bloodlines. Obviously, a lot of detail to the manual and the cover, beautiful art. But as we move into the manual itself, it looks like they've gone with a black and white aesthetic, which was cheaper. Obviously, as they started printing games and manufacturing games more and more, I'm sure they pulled back on spending money on color. I know there were still it's a mix. Like, you'd still see manuals that had a lot of color and design on them, but obviously Castlevania Bloodlines, besides seeing a lot of the art here, oh look, Konami had a magazine called Konami Insider featuring contest previews and everything you've always wanted to know about Konami, but we're afraid to ask. That's cool. It's so funny that they say subscribe today, and subscribing in the modern age is, back then it was filling out a form and you would subscribe to a subscription service. And now on Twitch, we actually sub, so I think that's pretty neat. Here is Sega CD. I think we had a mention from Biff. This is Demolition Man. I don't know if this one had a lot of color to it though, Biff, but interesting to pull up and see what a manual would look like from the Sega CD universe. Obviously, it pretty bland, black and white, with the cover having color. But again, still has everything you need to know. Like, let's read the summary here. It says, the city residence observation and surveillance system has detected an opening in one of the across ports to the abandoned maintenance and utility tunnels. The access ways leads to the underground city commonly known as the Wasteland. This is the last recorded sighting of Simon Phoenix. No video surveillance is available for this sector of the city. So just like really cool information that just adds to the lore of the game you're playing. I never played Demolition Man for the Sega CD. I don't even know if it's good. Cold Blue for D. And D says, one day I'll find a Sega CD. I just got my Saturn last year. Collecting for that is expensive, though. Yes, D. I don't know if you knew, but Sega Saturn is like the heart and soul of my collection. I actually have a pretty good Sega Saturn collection, but only because half of it is from my childhood, and the other half I started collecting Sega Saturn about 10 years ago when it was affordable to do. I have about 70 of the original American run Saturn games, and it is my joy. But what makes me really happy is you have a Sega Saturn. Love that system, and we've talked about it before on the podcast, and it's my favorite system of all time, without a doubt. Moving on to a Saturn magazine, as we're talking about the Saturn, none other than the amazing and lovely Daytona USA, which has some of the best music in video games. Obviously, we have a beautiful cover. The Saturn manuals are pretty big, but I believe they did more black and white aesthetics as well. Obviously, still pretty, in design, but nothing that kind of blows you out of the water like those NES designs with all the color. Oh, and here's the Racer, which I actually just got, which is the big racing controller, which if you check out my Instagram, I have a photo of it, and I think on my TikTok as well, I posted a video. But love racing games on the Sega Saturn. You know, the Sega Saturn was known for racing games and awesome fighting game ports. So definitely an awesome game. Of course, we got to move on to the Dreamcast. And as we're seeing as these older generations, we're seeing less and less in the color design. So again, here's Crazy Taxi's manual, which didn't have color either, but still lots of detail here, lots of information, and also probably one of the greatest games ever made, at least a top 50 game of all time. Also, shout out to Crazy Taxi, the arcade cabinet, the stand-up with the pedals. Is also a fantastic version of Crazy Taxi, but a lot of people that play the Dreamcast can always recall and throw back to the wonderful Crazy Taxi. Let's see what we got here. So this is Jaguar, Alien vs. Predator. Obviously, now we're really pulling away from even colored. The cover pages of the manual being in color. This is Alien vs. Predator, which is probably one of the few good Jaguar games out there. But obviously very bland. But let's read the introduction. Alien vs. Predator is a tactical simulator depicting the events following the fall of Camp Golgotha Colonial Marine Training Base to a group of xenomorphs, aliens, not yet fully classified. Limited data from the incident also allows for reasonable simulations from the viewpoints of the two alien groups believed to have participated in the incident. The data contained is considered top secret, as this release and any duplication, distribution, or display is punishable by the court-martial with a maximum penalty not to exceed 7 years imprisonment in the Yugoth penal colony. So really a lot of details there. I butchered a lot of those names there, but nothing to kind of like write home about here, except for the cool integration of the keypad controller into this game, which is really cool, where you could select your weapons right here, and it shows you that the map button's there and that you have all that stuff available to you. Moving on to PlayStation, we have Silent Hill's manual here. One of the greatest PlayStation games. Actually, I prefer Silent Hill 2. But this is, again, moving away from color into... But a lot of detail here and a beautiful aesthetic, even though it's black and white. The Silent Hill manual definitely looks nice, has a lot of information, of course. Not too long, and in the back of it has these like scary eyes, which is pretty neat. Next is going back in time to a Commodore manual. This is a Commodore 64 manual for Nightmare on Elm Street. Obviously, we're going back in time, and they've gone full black and white, and this was produced, this is a, what year was this? 1989 Nightmare on Elm Street, but as you can see, more text than photos here, and they even have about Freddy. Let's see, Freddy Krueger, the spawn of 100 maniacs, was a murderer in the Elm Street area of Springfield, USA, whose trademark of terror was a razored glove. Through eventually caught and tried for his crimes, he was never convicted by the courts because of a technicality. The parents of the community, however, sought out their own justice. Driven by revenge, they hunted him down in his boiler room and burned him alive. Damn, the community like night watch for that. They were intense. Like they burned that guy. And now no wonder he came back and killed everybody. I mean, I would be pretty pissed off if you burned me. A gamer looks at 40. What are you going to do when you turn 50? What's up, man? Good to see you, Bill. Welcome to the Cafe BTW podcast. We're just kind of finishing up the show today. Going to go through a couple more manuals here. We got the 3DO, which has a beautiful color aesthetic. Alone in the Dark, which is a really cool game, by the way. Really awesome. But as we can see, very similar to all the other ones, very black and white, but lots of information. A shorter manual. There's only 7 pages to this one. Bloodwake, we're going into kind of like getting closer to the modern retro era, but look at the detail and design in the Xbox manual for Bloodwake. Woo! beautiful red aesthetic backgrounds with beautiful design. This really looks beautiful. Like the manual for this game is definitely done up, especially when you have kind of like aesthetical backgrounds with the beautiful red design that matches the cover really well. And it kind of moves on throughout the rest of this manual. And there's the Duke, the famous original Xbox controller, but really got to put it to Xbox. They really still were releasing manuals for the Xbox, and I think the Xbox 360 as well, which I have Perfect Dark Zero, which wasn't the greatest game, but it was a release title for the Xbox 360. Obviously, I love the Perfect Dark game on the N64. This one was a little bit of a disappointment, but look at the design of the manual here. This is really thought out and well known. I know late to the party, but I'll check out the VOD, and I'll be shocked if I'm still doing the show at 50. That's all good, man. That's what the VODs are for. But yeah, this is a beautiful manual. Lots of beautiful aesthetic and art here for the Perfect Dark Zero for the the 360. And finally, my last one is not to be mistaken with the Mandela effect. It's Berenstain Bears, not Berenstain Bears, everybody. But this is an original Atari 2600 Berenstain Bears manual. And I think it's really cute. So obviously you can see our friend is on a little tricycle, and there's their house, that awesome tree house. Even though this isn't full color, it's absolutely awesome in design. I mean, look at him like going through all the little things and details you need to know about, and they're using him as kind of like a mascot to everything. So really cool. I love the design. I never played this game. Did anyone play this game? I didn't, but really cool. I love the design here. But yeah, just to kind of, as we're closing out on an hour, I thought it was going to be a shorter show, actually, because we didn't have a guest. But as we're closing out an hour, you know, it really goes to show to you that the lost art of video game manuals, you know, it's a lost art because they don't print them as much anymore. And like we said, there's companies like Limited Run and IM 8-Bit that are providing kind of reprints for the games and the manuals. But there really is a lost art to it. And you know, I never did an episode that focused on the manual, so I'm really glad that you all joined me to kind of walk through that history, because I remember there was nothing like going to the store with my dad. My dad was the guy that always bought my games and took me to the store. And I kind of have a fond memory of I always have this memory of going to buy Shadows of the Empire for the N64. And when we finally got it at Toys R Us, I remember going immediately into my dad's car, ripping open the cellophane or the outside wrap, and then opening the box and pulling out the manual and just quickly looking through it, because that was nostalgic. That feeling is a feeling that people and kids today just won't have the privilege of knowing. Because they're not going to open a game and start looking at a manual. Today, you just throw in your CD or you download the digital download, and that's it. And if you need help with the instructions, you kind of Google it and you look up, and they might have a digital manual. But that's not the same, folks. That's not the retro nostalgia that we grew up on. So is there a lost art to video game manuals? Absolutely. Absolutely. Great episode. Thanks for the show and chat. You got it, Acid. Same. The manual is a great trailer. So as you continue to, if you collect games and you see a manual out there and it's only $1, buy it. Help preserve these things, because as we move into this digital age, when I visited GDC, everything was on Web3. Everything was so digital focused in the gaming industry. Don't forget the importance of preservation, and the manual is just as important as the cart, is just as important as the box. And I don't know if it's harder to find a manual versus a box. I would think that the manuals are easier to find. So just remember that it is just as important for preservation of these wonderful video games to make sure that we take hold and keep these wonderful pieces of video game history. And not only that, they're beautiful pieces of art, And, you know, it really just gives me butterflies thinking about how I used to interact with manuals. And I really regret throwing out a lot of them too. So that being said, I did want to make an announcement that next Saturday, on April 2nd, I am so excited to have all three hosts of the Gamers Week podcast coming on the show. That means we got Retro Game Brews, we got Donnie and Blue, if you know them from Twitter, all coming on for a 3-guest episode guest hosting with me on Cafe BTW, a morning gaming podcast. And don't forget that I was featured on their episode 13, where I was filling in for Retro Game Brews. We talked about Facebook gaming and how that's kind of going down. We talked about shoot 'em ups. So don't forget to check out the show next week because it is going to be fun. All those three people are amazing, and I can't wait to have them on the show. I really appreciate, of course, you know, I'm really exhausted because I was at GDC, but, you know, I'm really glad I was able to fit in an episode today. Again, you know where to find me. All my socials are below. I want to thank all the people that showed up for the live, and I just want to remember to remind everyone that's watching on VOD, I see you too, and I thank you as well. That being said, I don't think we're going to raid anyone today. We are going to close out, and I'm just going to say one thing that I'm going to start to say more often now. Remember, we only have one shot at this, and what do I mean? One shot at life. So be nice to people, because that is very important. I'm Andy, and again, we'll see you next Saturday on Cafe BTW, a morning gaming podcast. Until next time, we'll see you then.